Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really pleased to have with me as my guest Giri Pathmanaban, who's a partner at Latham. Giri, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Did I get that pronunciation right?
Perfect. I'm very impressed. Most people get it wrong.
All right. Well, the reason I invited you to my interview is because you have one of the more unusual backgrounds. You have an undergraduate degree in computer science. Tell me a little bit about why you chose that degree in the first place.
Sure. It was a combination of a couple of things. So my family, my dad was a doctor. He was a surgeon, and like most Indian parents, wanted me to follow in his footsteps and especially become a surgeon. The only small problem was that I didn't like the sight of blood, which is, kind of a hindrance to becoming a doctor. And so then the question became, what else are you going to do? And, I grew up in India. So there, traditionally, you either, kids are told you become a doctor or you become an engineer. Those are kind of the two big fields. And nobody ever talks about lawyers. I don't know why. Not that India is lacking for a number of lawyers, but growing up, kids are said, to become a doctor or an engineer. So I started developing a fascination for computer science. I had pretty early on. I remember I had one of the earliest laptops amongst all my friends. When I think I got that when I was in 6th or 7th grade. I started coding at an early stage. I remember I developed a database using, at the time, it was something called DBase. That led to, okay, I'm not going to do medicine. I'm not going to do surgery. And then the natural alternative is engineering. And I already had this fascination for software and particularly computers. So I decided, let's do computer science. And that was going to be my calling for life at the time.
Yeah, right. Well, is that something you enjoy doing? I mean, I assume you enjoy programming.
I did at the time, yes. Like I said, I was pretty far advanced as those things went back in the day. Nowadays, my 5-year-old, I mean, my now 9-year-old started learning coding when he was 5 or 6. But at the time, it was pretty unusual to have a 6th grader doing coding, especially in India, right?
Yeah.
And so I did enjoy it at the time, and I felt that it would be a great career path for me at the time. Yeah.
Did you ever work as an engineer, or you made the switch to law school before you really got a chance to work as an engineer?
So I didn't work like at a big company or anything like that. I did do a lot of work. So when I finished my undergraduate degree in India, and then I moved to the University of Michigan to do a master's degree. And to finance that degree, I had to work on campus. So I did do a lot of coding as part of my kind of research assistantship at the University of Michigan.
Now, did you get the master's degree were you thinking about a PhD at the time, or was it you went there just to get the master's degree?
I was not really thinking about, I don't ever remember even thinking about doing a PhD. All I was thinking about was, let me get my degree, let me get a job, pay off my student loans. And that was kind of the path I had in my mind at the time.
I see. So when did law school finally, how did that get into the picture here?
So really serendipity. I mean, honestly, law school, like I said, was never in the picture. Like there was no lawyers in my family. Like nobody ever talked about becoming a lawyer. It was either doctor or engineer kind of thing, this dichotomy, if you will. And towards my 4th semester, my last semester of my master's, right, I realized that I was not enjoying coding anymore. And I realized that that was not something that was going to be a long-term career path for me. So then the question became like, what was I going to do, right? So I was exploring possibly doing an MBA. And of course, to do an MBA, you needed like several years of work experience typically, right? But I was willing to do that and get the work experience before doing the MBA. But my father who's been a great inspiration for me throughout, told me that I want you to do something exceptional with your life.
Hmm.
And it's doing an MBA, sounds nice and all, but it doesn't sound exceptional to me. Those were his words.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is not to denigrate anybody who's gotten MBAs and done extraordinary things in their life, but that was kind of like uh, what he was thinking at the time. So I want
Yeah.
you to do something exceptional. So I
Uh-huh.
think you can do a lot with this degree, even if you don't like coding. I think you can do a lot with this master's degree, or you can do something else. But I want you to think about it. So
Mm-hmm.
my last semester in at the University of Michigan, I decided I'm going to explore some class that is non-engineering
Hmm.
and figure out what to do. And the question was, what was that going to be? And there were a bunch of classes in the business school I could take. There are a bunch of classes, a lot of different, University of Michigan has a whole bunch of classes, a lot of variety. So I was just walking around and thinking, can I take this? Can I do this? You could get to kind of audit classes to decide whether you're interested enough to take it or not. So the
Yeah.
last day, literally the last day to add classes, I was walking around and I came across this class, which is called Intellectual Property Implications for Technology,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was taught by this person named Jonathan Alger, who was working at the general counsel's office at the University of Michigan at the time. He's a lawyer from
Hmm.
Harvard Law School and all of that. So I decided I'll just sit in and see whether I like it. I didn't know anything about intellectual property.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know much about intellectual property at the time, but I sat in on that one first class, and it was fascinating to me to see how technology kind of interacts with
Hmm.
the law,
Huh.
and specifically how you need knowledge of how the technology works in order to figure out whether the law fits or not.
Yeah.
So then I ended up taking that class and I loved it. And then the question became like, what do I do with my interest, my newfound interest? I did really well in the class, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and Mr. Alger was kind enough to suggest I really would think about law school if I were you.
Hmm.
And that was the first time law school ever entered into my mind.
Hmm.
And so I thought about it for a long time. I didn't go right away. I didn't apply right away because I didn't have the money, frankly,
Mm.
and it was going to cost a lot. But the interest kept peaking inside me, and then eventually I went to law school. So
Wow, amazing. Now, was that class offered through the law school, or was it actually offered one through one of the other departments?
no, so I would never have even thought about going and attending a class in law school. So that was why I was so lucky, because like it was offered at the School of Information, which is where I actually studied.
Okay.
So so and um and yeah, so I was lucky that he was even teaching that
Awesome.
class
Interesting.
to and it was available to non-law students, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Oh, that's really cool. So when you got to law school, what did you think? How did you like it compared to being an engineer and everything?
I enjoyed every bit of law school. I was at Columbia. I felt like I was finally doing something that was really my calling, so to
Uh-huh.
speak. I really enjoyed the policy aspects of it. I always have.
Mm.
I enjoy policy generally. I enjoyed the vibrant discussions we had in class, the debates, and all of that. So I enjoyed every aspect of it. Now I went knowing that I wanted to do intellectual property law, so I was kind of unique from from my fellow students in that respect. Most people didn't know what kind of law they wanted to practice when they go to law
Right.
school, which is absolutely fine. Uh, but I knew what I wanted to do,
Mm.
but I still found all the other classes, especially the classes that you take in first year, torts and contracts and civil procedure, all really interesting. So,
Mm.
and the professors were fantastic. So,
Now, did you know going into law school that you wanted to be a litigator, or when did you kind of figure that out? Because obviously you could have done patent prosecution or IPs, other areas you could have been a transactional lawyer, not necessarily litigator. When did you kind of figure that out?
yeah, so I did not know is the short answer. And I probably didn't even know all all the different types of lawyers you could be as an intellectual property lawyer when I went in. So it was kind of like an unknown. And then my first summer, my 1L summer, I summered at a law firm called Baker Botts in Dallas. And they did a lot of patent prosecution at the time. And so I got to do some prosecution and a little bit of litigation, mostly prosecution work, which is very valuable because I realized immediately that I didn't want to do prosecution. I don't want to write patent applications. I don't want to talk back and forth with the patent office, the kind of stuff that patent prosecutors do. Valuable skills, to be sure, and a lot of them are excellent at it, but that's not something that I wanted to do. And law school kind of is so biased towards litigation. I mean, the whole thing is like litigation driven, right? So it was just kind of a natural for me. It's like, okay, I don't want to do prosecution. What else is there? I wanted to do litigation, and I've been very happy with that choice.
Now, do you feel like you get a chance to actually use your computer science background? Have you had to review a lot of code and stuff like that? Does it come in handy?
Very handy. Yes.
Oh,
so I wouldn't say necessarily the computer science background, although by itself, I mean, I do use that as well, and I certainly read code for certain clients in certain cases and things like that. But the engineering background as a whole is what equips me for these cases is not necessarily kind of what I learned 25 years ago in some circuit design class, but kind of the aptitude that I have to learn new technology very quickly. So every case, every patent case, every trade secret case, kind of cases I do every day involves cutting edge technology. Technology is always changing and it always evolves, right? So you're not going to know what you learned 20 years ago is not necessarily going to be the same thing that you're going to deal with day in, day out on these cases. But what is useful is the fact that I have the skill and ability to understand the technology pretty quickly and converse with the engineers in kind of terms that they understand and they follow.
Totally.
And then try to simplify that.
Do you think clients can tell the difference when they talk to you? Like, do you think they notice?
They do, and they've told me so. And engineers certainly tell me, "Wow, I'm impressed that you can understand this stuff pretty quickly."
Yeah.
And yeah, so I do think that it's a valuable skill to have. But then, the challenge is to learn the geek speak of whatever it is you're dealing with at that moment, and then translating it into jury speak, right? Like simple, plain English.
Yeah. As they say in engineering, impedance matching.
Exactly. It's a challenge. I love it. I mean, it's a unique skill, and you constantly work at it. Yeah.
What's the most complicated technology you've had to try to understand, would you say, in all the cases you've worked on?
Yeah, so we had a case for Apple. It was against a company called SLC, St. Lawrence Communications, and it was about voice coding. So speech coding specifically. So it's technology that's in cell phones that, it compresses when I talk to you over the phone, or even actually as we're talking on Zoom. It's different from a live conversation. It's compressing what I'm saying, and then it's going to transmit it as bits of ones and zeros, and something gets detranslated or decompressed on the other end. It involves lots of complicated mathematical equations and algorithms. It was incredibly complicated, these 5 patents. So that was a challenge. That I spent 3 years with that case, and I think by the end of it I understood all of it, but certainly not at the beginning. But you hire experts and they help you along the way. But again, the challenge is to make it simplified in a way that you can present to a judge or a jury.
Totally got it. Well, what does your father think about your ultimate decision? Did he think you made an exceptional career decision?
He was very happy with it. He was very happy that I I got admitted to some of the top law schools and went to Columbia, and he got to attend my graduation. And unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but he was very proud of what I had accomplished by then.
Oh, that's
So
awesome. No, that's awesome. Well, Giri, this has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate your taking the time as a former engineer myself. I love talking to engineers who became lawyers. So thanks for taking the time.
thank you for having me. Thanks a lot, Richard.
This is Richard Hsu and Giri Pathmanaban. Thanks.